In the first video about building Wrenton, we reached the stage where the track was laid and ballasted, the station platforms and buildings were in place, and several other buildings were ready to be installed. But first I needed a couple more houses to complete the right-hand end of the layout. I drew a rough plan of how the buildings would be arranged. I wanted to make the scenery as a freestanding unit. The road will climb a hill, the slope of which was dictated by the existing buildings, so I needed to make a scenic base with exactly that slope. My solution was to use multiple layers of 5mm thick foam board, cut to produce the required incline. It looked rather like a contour map. Here's the line of the road. The area at the bottom right will become the tunnel. The church will sit on this level area, and here's where some of the other buildings will go. An initial experiment showed the need to include some steel rods in the lower layers to prevent any warping. Cutouts were made for the buildings to plug into, and some photos were taken in the garden and in place on the layout. After priming it with diluted PVA, I plastered over the foam board using household filler. Back in the garden, my neighbour's cat checked my work before I could spray on some grey and brown paint. The buildings were then fixed in place, and with some randomly placed trees, I took the first photo of the view looking up the hill, the first of many. The first greenery was added between the corner cottage and its neighbour, using various woodland scenics materials. I also tried using some of the material used for stuffing teddy bears and the like, pulling it apart before spraying on some colour and gluing on some coarse turf. And then it was time for the first real garden to be built. I wanted some crazy paving, and I photographed my own, but printed up it didn't look too good, so I used Photoshop to produce something with more contrast. I also wanted some flowers, of course. Blobs of glue on a sheet of greaseproof paper laid on the lid of an old tin had some static grass applied with the applicator earthed to the edge of the lid. When dry, I dabbed some glue onto the tips of the grass and sprinkled on some coloured scatter. Clumps of foliage, a small lawn, and the first garden was complete. More gardens soon followed, causing much less backache than real gardens do. This one has some small conifers, which were made by rolling a length of paper round a short metal trunk. A quick spray of green, and then coarse grass was added. Some low-relief trees were made as a unit, soldering the wire trunks to a strip of printed circuit board. Even lower relief ones were made by gluing scenic material onto the back scene, which had been added to the baseboard by this time. After adding ground cover to the area between the road and the back scene, I planted some of the trees seen in the first video, producing a dense mini forest. Moving to the front of the layout, I made the tunnel portal using the Silhouette Portrait cutting machine to make most of the parts. It was fixed on the baseboard, and I checked that the foam board fitted okay. The machine also cut the first of many lengths of line-side fencing. I made this from 20 thou plasticard, reinforcing the posts with strips of 20 thou on both sides. The churchyard was developed using some bought monuments and lots more made with tiny pieces of plasticard. All the graves should, of course, point in the same direction, but I liked the look of having some at different angles. A signboard beside the path declares the vicar to be the Reverend Nigel Gresley. Unfortunately, you can't see that from the front of the layout. Having the whole area constructed away from the baseboard made it much easier to add all these details. It also made possible some photos from the back of the church, shots which can't be taken with the back scene in the way. More trees were made to fill the area beyond the church, and they were planted after first adding some ground cover texture to the area. A path leads up into the wood. I left the area on the railway side of the fence untreated for the time being. The whole assembly was tried on the baseboard, and once again I could photograph that view up the hill.